Oh, you always are. Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. Happy Friday. Woohoo!
Yay. Happy Friday, Jane.
It's a sunny and springy day here in Minnesota, so I'm hoping that Michigan has some sunshine too. We're excited to see everyone. We've got a little bit of a smaller group than we did on the 19th, and I think that's great. I'm looking forward to having a little bit more time with you all. So just gonna kick it off. This is the third of three, so the last of three webinars designed to support you all in the RCCCs and your work groups on collaboration and learning. So this is our the last chance for us to ever talk about this. No, I'm just kidding. This is just an opportunity for us to have 75 minutes together to do this. So my name is Jane Tigan. I'm a consultant with ECIC, and I'm here with Erin Watson from Weaving Change, our evaluation consultant for this work, and also being supported by Sable Carter. So Sable, thank you for being here, helping us with breakouts and making sure that everything goes well. Um, so just a little bit about expectations for this meeting. You will use that light pre-work that I sent out recommending that you find those 1 to 3 strategies for your work group. You'll have a little bit less than 30 minutes of peer interaction time, and I can almost promise you that it still won't feel like enough time with your peers. We've gotten that feedback time and time again that people want more time to talk with each other. So we really tried to emphasize that for this period of time, and folks will still want more. So that's also an invitation to you all to reach out and keep the conversation going. We will have the deck resources and templates that will be available after the session. So throughout the session, we're going to be sharing with you resources that you can use to deepen your work. This is not a 75 minutes and you can do it without any support and know exactly what you're doing. This is a kind of the beginning of presenting to you all a host of resources for you to use as you're working with your work groups. Alongside that, we've got office hours, TA opportunities that will keep this going. So just to say that the deck resources and templates will be available after the session. And I want to share that much of this work that we're going to be talking about in this 75 minutes is based on the change agent guide that Erin put together specifically for our CCCs in November of 2025. So any one of these topics that we talk about today, if you're really wanting to do a deep dive on this, you're going to find a lot more depth and content in that guide. We have simplified some of the structure just for the format that we're in right now. But there's a lot of really great content in that document. So many of you have seen this slide before, but I think it's really important for us to kind of ground ourselves in the research. And also, I think for folks who have been in this work, in our own experiences about what we know about fixing big challenges. So the big piece that research will tell us is that nobody can fix these big systemic challenges like childcare alone, right? It's not one person, it's not one organization. So if you're feeling like that right now, release. Take that burden off your shoulders. You cannot fix it on your own. Sometimes maybe we wish we could because then we could control it, right? But that's a different conversation. We can't do it by ourselves, and no one organization can do it. ECIC understands that. MyLeap understands that. It's why we have requirements about who is in these coalitions. We need an entire ecosystem present in order to do this. So no one can do it alone. And this is maybe harder, we probably aren't going to get it right the first time, right? The things that we think will work, if the things that we thought would work, we'd be done by now, right? So we're, I think, grappling with the fact that we may not be getting it right in the work that we've been doing because the size and scale or whatever that might be. So, in order to mitigate those two realities, nobody can do it alone. We need to be together, right? We need to work together and we need to know how to do it together. And that's collaborative capacity and those skills. Really, what does it take to work together so that we can move to fix these challenges in collaboration. And since we can't get it right the first time, we need to get better about learning and adapting our approaches. These are muscles that we need to build. And that really is saying, how do we try stuff out systematically? We're not encouraging folks to just try a bunch of random stuff and see, what spaghetti sticks on the wall. How do we shift the way that we're thinking so that we're doing this in a systematic way and can say, in a reflective and evaluative way, how do we change what we're doing so that it is addressing what we've learned so far? So these are kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to try and what we're trying to do in this series here. So just to kick us off, I'd like you all in the chat to type out what are some things that you do or tools that you use to learn and adapt in your work. I've met a number of you. I know you're learning and adapting in your work all the time. So let's just sort of put in the chat a few things that you are using right now to do that learning and adaptation work. I'll read off a couple as you go. Ooh, Notebook LM. That's great. I don't even know what that is. I'm searching that one up after this. Reviewing data, rapid feedback loops at the ends of meetings. I love that, Woody. Stakeholder feedback loops. That's great. Yeah, I think these feedback loops in different ways are a really key part of that learning and adaptation. Active listening. Wonderful. Yes. So one thing I would say is we all scheduling time for reflection. Oh, Sarah, that's good. That's a really great, both personal and within a group, right? Making sure that there's time and space for all of those different levels of reflection. These are wonderful. Constantly reading new research, policy briefs, reports, and applying the praxis framework. Wonderful, Anissa. Maybe you can share a little bit more about that praxis framework for folks in the chat. Yes. So I think what's helpful here is to know that we have skills and we can continue to build those and build those muscles of this work. So what we're going to talk about today, trying stuff out systematically, is the learning and adaptation cycle of understand, design, and we either say test or act. This is really focused on the work groups and how work groups can put this into practice. So I know we've got quite a few coalition leads. I think, as much as the coalition leads can pass this on to the work groups, that'll be really wonderful. And this is the other part of the circle here is that collaborative capacity work. So because the collaborative capacity element is so important, we're also going to talk about this yellow box here on the collaborative capacity side of shared vision, strategies, and goals, because that really is important, not just at the coalition level, but even at the work group level. I'll just as we look at this, I want to point out that we have, the leads and co-leads here and the work groups here. So today's session, we're really focusing on work groups. And on that March 3rd session for the folks who are here, we spent quite a bit of time talking about collaborative capacity at that coalition level because the leads are really focused on that coalition health. So work group members, the work groups that you all have, the members really need to know similar things that as a whole coalition we need to know. Why are we here? Where are we going? And what are we going to do together? And they need this on repeat. Research is really clear that we need essentially a map that we all agree on from the start. Now, this picture of the plane doesn't have like the seat back experience with the video, but I was just talking to Aaron and Sable about a flight that I took the other day, and I went back to that, like, where's the plane? how many hours do we have to go? Where are we headed? What's the landscape like? So we need a map to know where we're going, and the reason why is that it motivates us. It provides direction for local efforts. It motivates individuals to get engaged. Right? We're like trying to recruit people. We need to tell them what we're doing and why we're doing it, and it aligns the energy of diverse individuals and organizations around those shared goals. So we know clearly we need lots of different people here. So everybody needs to know where we're going. It also really bridges those diverse interests and of the folks in the room, the ecosystem of the room. And I think lastly, it can guide interaction when there's conflict. And this is also very important, right? If you can tell people, this is what we're doing, remember, this is why, it can help when there is inevitably conflict in that space. There are lots of different ways to provide this map. For the coalition leads, you've seen us talk about plan on a page. These one pagers help just allow people to have a tangible object of what's going on. So as a work group, it's also helpful to know this. So on the next page, I'm going to show you a template to get you started. And if your work group doesn't have 100% clarity where you can fill in the blanks, that's okay. But it's a tool that you can use with your group. So this is a fill in the blank worksheet. Our work group is working to fill in the blank. To achieve this, we will do these things. We are tracking these data points to tell us if we're making progress on our goals. And then this is our priority for us because, and we'll walk through each one of these a bit here. So throughout this, we're going to be talking about an imaginary region called Region 11. And the Region 11 Municipal Engagement Working Group. So I'm going to walk you through what this might look like for municipal engagement, just so you can kind of start to see what this could be. The Region 11 Municipal Engagement Working Group is working to engage municipalities and partners on restrictive zoning policies and redevelopment mechanics. To achieve this, we will do these items: conduct outreach, audit zoning, support and advocate for changes, reach out to developers, etc. We are tracking outreach calls, meetings, audits conducted, etc. And this is a priority for us because there's significant momentum, the potential or impact is great, the likelihood for systems change is high, the partnerships developed in this work can generate additional strategies, and there's interest across the region. Some of this might sound resonant with the goals that we have for the entire RCC work. So pay attention to that kind of continuity of what we're trying to do at each of these levels, and how it shows up. For folks who are really trying to think through some strategies, maybe come up with more, I want to just remind you that you have access to a couple of great documents that can serve as prompts for you. So one is all of the combined RCCC project plan strategies from FY 2026. Erin has compiled these, and they are organized for you by goal. It's a really great document to see, like, oh, what are the other regions doing in implementing childcare business supports, etc. We have also shared with you an ecosystem kind of change guide that provides strategies irrespective of the specific system that you're working within. So it's not just childcare, but some ideas and prompts for that. So you can use those when you're trying to think about your strategies. Just a reminder that you have those in your space. So the next session that we're going to have is actually our breakouts, where you all are going to introduce yourself, share where your work group is, kind of in its storming, norming, forming. If you think you're ready for this idea of a plan on a page, and then talk through your 3 strategies. You're going to have just 7 minutes to do this. So it's not, a 20-minute session, but we've made the groups intentionally pretty small so that you can have a little bit more time than you might otherwise with a 4-minute breakout. Erin is going to put in the chat the link to all of the breakout prompts. We've got that way you don't have to take a screenshot. They're just all in the document itself. Spoiler alert, all the breakouts are there. So, if you really want to work ahead, you can, but we prefer if you just stick with that first of three breakouts. Yes, so hopefully folks can, Sable is getting folks in the group, and there are a couple that we're going to add in Sable that are in the chat. Any questions before we go? Okay, Sable, go ahead. Start them up. So, on use your emojis. Who felt like that was, talking about those strategies that you have, who thought that was easy and who maybe thought that was harder than you imagined? Put your thumbs down. Just get a little bit of chat interaction or emoji interaction. So we are going to be talking about the first session or the first portion of this learning and adaptation cycle of understand. So, as we look at this cycle, we're really typically we start with understand, right? The where are we? However, you all have done a ton of work in understand, right? You've been in the planning phase. You are, your regions. Of course, we keep asking ourselves these questions, but we're going to jump in on the design side. So we're really going to be focusing on refining strategies so that they're ready for action. And the first step of that refining process is actually prioritizing. The first piece is prioritizing. Then we're going to be talking about pulling in additional perspectives, and then we'll get to refine. So even though we're saying refine strategies, it's really this these sub steps within the design phase. Throughout this session, we're going to be talking about Region 11's municipal engagement strategy, as we mentioned before. So first, I just want to kind of flag for folks, and you maybe found this as you were talking about your strategies. It's very possible that you need to flesh out your strategy details so that everybody's on the same page. You might find that the bullet point that you have isn't quite sitting right. It's maybe too vague or it's too hard to hold. You can't understand like who's the person who's doing this action. Like if you ever diagram sentences, who's kicking whom, right? Like what's the action that's happening in this strategy? So if you find yourself kind of squinting or scratching your head about how this would implement, it's a good sign that you maybe need to refine that strategy. Even the one that we pulled out of the strategy session needed to be drawn out a little bit more. So on the left, we've got the original, and on the right, we have a much more fleshed out strategy description that kind of allows you to see who would be doing what and what the outcome would be. So I'll just let you all kind of take a look there at that fleshed out strategy description. It doesn't mean the strategy is wrong, just needs a little bit of sharpening. So that's even, you may find that happens throughout your process, but hopefully it happens earlier rather than later. So the first piece we want to talk about is prioritizing. A big thing here is that it's likely that you have too many strategies right now for your work group. If you've met with your work group and you've got a list of 12 things that you're going to be doing, we need to boil that down. Erin and I recommend that you prioritize 1 to 3 project strategies to focus on in the next 5 months. We can't do this all. We can't do it all at once. So what are you going to do and what are you going to do very well? That's what this process is going to help you figure out. Some of the ways that you can prioritize are alignment with the goals. First and foremost, if it doesn't make sense with what you've laid out in your plan on a page or your coalition's plan, then it's probably not the right thing to be working on. Second is that it has momentum, right? We don't want to even if it's aligned, if you can't get people to do this work or people aren't interested in doing it, it's not going to be the right project strategy. Another piece is that it'll build momentum. If it's a dead end, if it's a one-time thing, or if it's something that has momentum, but that you can't see what the next subsequent strategies would be that would lead from there, it may not, again, you really have to sort of think through, is this the right strategy to be spending time on? And then from there, I think it's a question of capacity. Do we have the capacity to actually do this, or can we build it? If you've got something that has momentum or will build momentum, you may be able to figure out that capacity question. That's why we're putting it in kind of the second tier of priorities. Is the timing right? You know, we talk about municipal engagement in Region 11. If everybody just got through a cycle of their master plans, now probably isn't the right time to start talking about what to include in your master plan, right? Because they just went through that process as an example. So we have to make sure the timing is right. And then will it actually have an impact? Now, I think some folks might want to front load that question and put it at the front. We're suggesting that we put that at the end to really make sure that the impact piece that all of these other things are in line and it will have impact. I think sometimes if we start with impact, we try and convince ourselves that we can make all these other things happen. This way, we're really making sure that we have the foundational pieces, and of course, will it have impact? Okay. So as we're thinking about this priority work, we're recommending first just a reminder that this is here to help you know some ideas around your strategy. But we're going to give you a template so that you can really do this in a systematic way. So this template that you see here, the table that we have, is going to walk you through each of those 6 areas that I just walked through. And we're going to do this for 2 different strategies that we found in the work group strategies document. I want you to know that the last time we did this, Erin and I actually had different hats that we were wearing, and I was the facilitator, and Erin was acting out many different work group members. It was Oscar award winning, but nominating at least. But in the interest of time, we're going to just kind of walk through this so that you all can see it. But please chime in if you're feeling like your group is working on this, or you see a highlight with the work group that you're working on. So the 2 strategies that we're going to be talking about are sharing best practices with high impact municipalities. Remember, this is about municipal engagement. We are familiar with this as a strategy for some of the groups, and 3 to 5 zoning audits of high impact cities. So I want you to imagine that we're the work group, the municipal engagement work group for Region 11. And part of our work in this meeting that we're having is that we're going to walk through the priority matrix for each one of these. So we'll start with sharing the best practices. As we host this and facilitate this conversation, they tell us, yes, we believe that sharing best practices is aligned with our goals. We believe we have the momentum to do this, and that this will build momentum. So for the first 3, the work group feels like, yes, best practices are a really good way for us to move forward. Then we move to zoning audits. We've got these 3 to 5 zoning audits of high impact cities. The work group, the first pass of the work group says, absolutely, this is aligned with our region's vision and goals. We have our plan on a page that helps us remember what those things are, and it aligns. But we're not actually sure we have the momentum to do it. This is something that is a bit of an uphill battle because of, dynamics within the municipal planning community and where things are in different townships within our counties, whatever the case may be. But we do think if we can execute it on this, it'll build momentum. So that piece around having momentum in that work group, you can imagine somebody saying, we need to talk to other regions who have gone through this and understood what kind of a lift is it? What do we need to do to engage municipal planners? Does anybody know a planner who we could talk to about what this might look like? When there's a question mark in these boxes, that likely indicates work that needs to happen before the next meeting, between the meetings of your work group. So that's where you as a facilitator are assigning somebody, okay, who can call? What does it look like for us to refine this a little bit more? So just know that the question marks aren't no's, they are tasks, right, that need to be generated and figured out before the next meeting. So that's why we have this here, this refining question or deprioritize. If you've got a bunch of question marks and you don't have anybody in your work group who's volunteering to figure it out before the next meeting, that tells you that there probably isn't momentum or political will. So then we can walk through this and imagine, yes, sharing best practices. We've got the capacity to do it. We've got the timing. We've got impact. And let's imagine in the second meeting that we've been able to figure out that, yes, we can figure all of these, we'll be able to do this work. So this is all very context specific, but you can use this as that foundation for you to do this work. Before we hop to the next breakout where you're going to talk about prioritizing, I also want to talk about pulling in needed perspectives. So when we talk about refining the strategies, it's really important to take a pause and say, who really has weighed in on these? I've had conversations with regions where it's like, we got these strategies, but we don't really know if there is momentum. We don't know if these are the right ones. We don't think parents have been involved as much as they should be, et cetera. So when we talk about pulling in those needed perspectives, we really want to be able to say, if we are coming up with the same strategies we've always had, bringing in additional people can help us raise the strategy ceiling, meaning expand the types of things that we're talking about. So if you have uncertainty about your strategies, or if you're here, they sound the same as they have for a long time, that might tell you that you need to bring in new voices. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start a huge listening tour where you go all over the region and spend 4 months doing this. You really need to consider the need and the scale. It could be some phone calls. It could be using your work group members who know other people to just pull in those ideas a little bit more. But it is a really critical part of this step. So, for that municipal engagement, it might be, does anybody have a planner that we could talk to, or talk to another region? We've got great resources within the region. Can we talk through a provider who's gone through it recently, or a parent leader who might be interested in helping advocate around the issue with local municipalities? What could that look like from that parent perspective? So just being really creative about who we're talking to. Okay, next our next breakout is going to be with your same group, where you're picking one strategy from your pre-work and talking through the priority matrix of that one strategy. And then I am also going to challenge you to come up with one thing you could do to push up your strategy ceiling. So after going through the prioritization, who's one person or type of person that you could talk to bring in, then go on to the next person's strategy. Erin has put in the chat the prompts here, and Sable will send you all out.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Erin, over to you.
All right. So, we've talked a lot about prioritizing, about perspectives. Now it's like finally time to get to the guts of the strategy itself. So you can click the animation. The next bit here is really looking at the strategies itself, and thinking, how might it need to be refined so that it's really ready to start testing and moving to action. Now note, many of your work groups may already be in the process of launching strategies. And so this isn't saying go back to the drawing board and start over. But the thing is, you can always refine strategies, especially as you're constantly gathering feedback. And so I see these things I'm going to be sharing with you, which are drawn from the systems thinking literature, as things you can constantly have in your back pocket. I think of them as tips for how you can always refine work, both future work and current work. And there's 4 things I'm going to share with you that kind of distill a lot of the key things from the systems literature. And I find if you can just focus on these four, it gets you like 95% of the way there. So the first one is about root causes. So root causes are basically why a problem is happening or a situation is happening. And the research tells us that strategies are far more effective and sustainably able to solve a problem when they address root causes instead of just the symptoms. And this takes some systematic pause moment to really think, have we understood enough to address those root causes? So a question in this municipal example could be, do we understand why the zoning codes are the way they are and they aren't yet aligned with childcare best practices? For example, are the municipal leaders aware of best practices? Do they have buy-in? Are there adoption barriers? Lots of different root causes could be going on here, and unless you surface those, it's hard to know if your strategy is actually addressing the underlying root cause. And sometimes if we don't do this, our strategies are more based on assumptions that can lead to some unintended consequences. Sometimes this also requires, like Jane said a few minutes ago, gathering some more information between meetings to really make sure that your strategies are honing in on those root causes. Okay, the next tip, I'm going to call impact. In another time and place, I used to call this equity, but we're calling it impact for today. Basically, this tells you whatever your strategies are doing, we need to design them in ways that they're going to reach and benefit the people and settings that need it most, and they aren't going to inadvertently disadvantage certain groups. And so you can just think through kind of systematically, have we designed this in a way that's meeting the greatest needs and that isn't causing unintended consequences? Next tip, self-sustaining strategies. How do we make sure that we're designing strategies so they'll continue to exist and create change after we're gone? We're talking about evergreen strategies, perennials here. So instead of a one-time thing, how do you embed the work into existing structures, processes, so that it will continue happening over time, even if you go away? And then finally, implementation. This is all about thinking about implementation before you start implementing, because research tells us, get this, that the success of a strategy, no matter how well designed it is 50% determined by how well it's implemented. So again, you can have the best design strategy, but if you can't figure out how to implement it well, you're already cutting off 50% of your effectiveness. That's a huge number in research terms. And so a lot of people started paying attention to this and thinking about what do we need to do to enhance implementation. And basically what this involves is thinking through what are the conditions we need to put in place now and the capacities we need to build so that when we implement, the set is staged, like the ground is tilled for something to work. And so let me show you a little bit what this would look like with that municipal example. So again, we're looking at how do we help municipal leaders shift zoning policies. So in a work group meeting, here's the type of conversation that you could have around these 4 tips. So for the root cause tip, a facilitator of a meeting, a work group meeting, might ask a question like, well, what's influencing this situation, this issue of the zoning codes not being aligned? And how well do our strategies address some of those root causes? You can click the next one, Jane. And through a conversation, people might bring up different root causes. One of them might be, you can click, that municipal leaders just don't even have the resources they need to be able to make some of the needed changes, even if they want to. So even if they know about them, they have buy-in, there still aren't resources in order to actually make the change. That's a huge root cause that unless your strategy is specifically targeted to address that, it's probably not going to work so well. And so you can engage the group, the work group, in thinking about how do we refine this strategy so it also addresses that root cause. One idea that could come up would be, well, let's help connect municipalities with local philanthropic funding sources so that they do have the resources. In fact, that exact thing happened in some of the regions across the state. So thinking through systematically, how do we address those root causes instead of ignore it? Let's look at impact. So here's another question you might ask. Is this strategy idea that we're looking at designed to reach and benefit the people and settings that need it most? And so to answer this, you might look back into some of the the data you collected back in 2024 with the planning phase. You might look at some of the MSU maps that show different childcare deserts. You might look at any other surveys that were done to really understand where are we seeing the biggest issues and the biggest barriers in our region. Let's make sure we focus our efforts to reach and benefit those areas so that we can be really systematic. So again, you can click ahead. The group might look at that data and really think about, wow, here's the areas that we need to make sure that our municipal work is reaching whatever strategy we use. But I'll give you a cautionary tale that you might not have those things in place yet. And so you need to really be accountable to think, do we actually have planning and development groups that have their relationships with the municipalities that are in most need of these changes? And if not, how do we make sure that we have what we need? And so again, between work group meetings, there's some work that might need to happen where folks need to go out and make sure that the planning and development people who are going to be helping to implement this strategy actually do have the connections they need to the most at need, kind of like highest need areas, settings, so that that can be built in, and the strategy, once it rolls out, is actually going to impact the places that it needs to. Now note, you can continue asking questions like this around those other tips, and continue to document and kind of pull out how do we systematically refine these strategies and take actions where needed to get additional information, get new perspectives, and continue to refine it until it's ready to go. You can click to the next slide, Jane. So here's kind of in a nutshell what was in design. Prioritize, especially if there's like a bunch of strategies, because I've seen the work plans. There's a lot of strategies. So prioritize what are the most important to focus on. Pull in those additional needed perspectives so that you enhance your strategy design ceiling. And then refine the strategy ideas, even the ones you're currently implementing, using those 4 tips. Now, you might be asking yourself, go ahead, Jen, how in the heck do I keep track of all this? Because that was a lot. And we're trying to avoid you looking like this. You can click forward, Jane. But the good news is Jane and I are obsessed with templates. And so that process you just heard me kind of model for you, there's a template that actually has specific facilitation questions for you, and an example of what you might hear based on the thing we were just modeling out for you. There's kind of like a template, both a blank one for you to fill out and an example so you can see, oh, this is the type of stuff that might come out in a meeting like this. So I encourage you to take a look at that. This can be really helpful, literally like to print out and bring with you to a work group meeting and fill your notes out so you can keep track of everything that you're doing. All right, I'm apologizing for going fast. We're trying to like put a lot into a little bit, so you can always follow up with Jane afterwards. But let's move on to the second phase of our action learning that we're looking at, which is an ACT. And really it's ACT and test. So you can click to the next one, Jane. There's a ton of research that's come out in the last like decade showing how important it is to constantly test out your ideas and get rapid feedback. And I was delighted to see all of the things in the chat saying how people are gathering rapid feedback. That is absolutely best practice, because the crux and the rub is that even our best ideas sometimes don't work out the way we think they should when you put them in the real world. And so the way to counter that is to really kind of pause and check yourself. This starts with first identifying what are our biggest assumptions about how this strategy will work that we might need to test out before we like launch full scale. And then 2, you can click forward. Given those assumptions, what are some simple ways that we can test out these strategies, even little bits of this strategy in the real world, gather rapid feedback, and then refine and improve those strategies so we're more confident that once we like launch them, they're going to be successful. So let's look at what this means in kind of practice. So identifying assumptions. Go back to the perspective group. You want people in your work group who are like, they relish the devil's advocate role in this phase. They are like your superpower. So you want to think through what are the biggest assumptions? What is needed for this strategy to work? And maybe even more importantly, what could cause it to fail? And so here's some assumptions that might emerge in a work group meeting. People might say things like, well, those, you can click the, yeah, the municipal leaders would even need to be interested in changing those zoning policies in the first place. They might not even care. So that's an assumption that they care to even do any of this work. Two, we're assuming that they're going to understand all the best practices that we're sharing with them. They might not, might be totally separate language and they might be confused. Third, we're assuming that they're going to have the time and money to make the changes, even if we connect them with additional funding. These are all assumptions that if they were broken, this strategy wouldn't work. And so we better test them out before like launching this full scale so we're confident that our idea is gonna work well. So again, once you identify the assumptions, then you think through simple ways to test them and gather rapid feedback. So for these assumptions that I just mentioned, here's some ideas that the work group might come up with. Hey, let's have the planning and development people in our work group who have connections with municipal leaders go and connect with a few of them and have an honest conversation to share the case examples. You can click to the next one, Jane. Share some of the case examples and the best practices that we're hoping to share and get their honest feedback. Do these make sense to you? Are these things that you would have any interest in doing? And then also have an honest conversation about their time and resources. So you're kind of like vetting it out and you're helping them to give you rapid feedback on is this something that would even work? Or are there additional refinements we need to make to the strategy so it will work? Um, Okay, so chances are likely you all do this in your normal job all the time. It's just making sure we're applying those good skills to the work group strategies and taking the time that's needed to be really systematic. So to launch you in that, we're going to do another breakout where you're going to pick one of those strategies that you've been thinking about from that framework and individually, quickly write out 5 assumptions. Devil's advocate mode, okay? What could cause it to fail? What would need to happen for it to work? Then share your assumptions with your group. This can be really illuminating to hear other people's assumptions. And then pick one person's assumptions and brainstorm some ways you might test them out, given their strategy. So jump into your work group, really lean into this because this can be extraordinarily helpful to prepare you to do this in your own work groups. Okay, Sable, you want to launch him? Then we'll just do it in the chat. All right,
Okay.
everyone, welcome back. I know that probably felt fast, but it's a scratch at the surface to start some of these really important conversations. I wanted to let you know before we go into the last phase of the action learning cycle, just about a resource that Jane and I worked on. Jane's going to throw it in the chat. So sometimes when people like share tools, you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, yeah, whatever. This is one you actually want to open because it has all the templates that we've been mentioning in this, and it literally has a like step-by-step facilitation guide for how you would run, how you could run a work group meeting to go through these different design phases. Thanks, Jane. And it's like really helpful, very detailed. You can adapt this, do whatever you want with it, but it gives so much of a foundation so that you don't go into these conversations feeling like, what do I do? This gives you the confidence and the competence to do this well. So please take a look at that. We worked hard on this to make sure that it really aligns with everything we talked with today, and you can line it up with the slides afterwards. Okay. Let's go back to the slide deck, Jane, and talk about the last phase of the action learning cycle that we're going to talk through, which again is counterintuitive because usually you start with understand, but we're just showing you can start anywhere in this cycle and can keep going. And so if we've
I'm assuming
designed,
that, Aaron,
yeah,
I'm assuming that you're going to send those to the regional lead so that we can get those to our work group, right?
absolutely.
Okay,
Jane will send out an email after this with like a goodie bag of all this stuff that you can just repurpose and send out to your work groups.
thanks.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we've refined the strategies. Oh, we're got it. We've started to test them out. Now it's time to understand using that feedback. Are these strategies actually working? Are our assumptions being held up? If not, what do we need to do? So here's 3 simple questions that are taken from work by Yang and colleagues. They have a great book called Adaptive Action that's all about this stuff if you're interested. 3 simple questions. First question is what? What did we learn? What happened as a result of our test? What assumptions held up? What didn't? What did we see? 2, so what? So what do we need to change or keep given what we're learning? What are the implications of what we just saw for the work that we're doing? So what? Third, now what? Given what needs to happen, who's going to do what? What are our next steps? Sometimes you're going to redesign a strategy that isn't working so well. Sometimes you're going to see a strategy that worked really well, and you can move to the next stage of scaling it up. And so you're constantly like adaptive in this moment for depending on what you what you learned, the so what implications, and now what moving to action. This is a super simple process. Again, there's a great template in that link that Jane put in the chat, just to help you keep track of this in a meeting. And that's important to switch to the next slide because one of the things that can absolutely make this work easier is if you take good notes. I know that sounds like a drag, but taking like good notes can really help you capture all the important details of what you're learning and how you're refining and testing your strategy so it's not lost. And so as you take notes, one simple technique is to just highlight different pieces of the meeting that have to do with different things. You're going to highlight refinements to your strategies. So you make sure that that's somehow documented and integrated into your work. You're going to highlight what you're learning from those tests, the what, so what kind of bits. You're going to highlight any action items that come up, regardless of what they're related to. Anytime someone is doing something between a meeting, you highlight it and make sure they know what they're doing and there's some follow-up. You also want to highlight if you're starting to hear about some small wins or systems changes come up as a result of the work you're doing. This could even be something super small, like a municipal leader is now putting a change to their zoning codes on their next agenda. Let's track that because it's showing there's movement and progress. And the good thing is, if you start to highlight these things in workgroup notes, you could share that with me, the evaluator. I could look through and start pulling out some of those things and create run charts for you that shows all the work over time. I can integrate it into the larger evaluation so all the regional coalitions can be learning from each other. And you can make sure that you have the information to deliver back to the work group to make sure they can do their work. Now, if note-taking sounds like it's, pulling teeth to you, Jane has a good idea for you on how to make it simpler.
Lots of us are using our AI companions within Zoom. It's recording, it's pulling transcripts for us, etc. We're really encouraging folks to toy around with that, right? Take an adaptive learning cycle with your AI companion. We have created a prompt, which is available in your template that will do this. It doesn't exactly highlight for you because sometimes AI is like that, but it will show you where those refinements to strategy are, learning from tests and action items. And that's just a way to start getting it to know your work and so that it can do some of that pulling out for you. If you use this and you find it helpful, let us know. We'd love to be able to refine the prompt and have it help other folks in their AI training journey. So this was a lot, right? You guys, Aaron and I only heard each other talk the entire time. You all had time within your sessions. This was a lot all at once. So you may be feeling like, where do I start? We want to really encourage you to look at shared vision and goals. We've listed here which of the slides you should look at to make sure that your work group knows what are we doing, what's our vision, and what are we trying to get at. We want you to refine those prioritized strategies. Remember, if you have 12 things that you're doing in your work group, it's too many. Just at full stop. You need to do fewer things and dive in on what those are. So we've got some suggestions here about how to do that prioritization and what to do. And then start trying things. We've got the change agent guide and some other resources to support you in doing that. For those of you who, like me, need a goal or a timeline, we're suggesting that you look at trying to get together with your work group and refining your priorities, having that shared vision and goal, Is that possible before your next coalition meeting? Think about that. Does that feel like a push and you're not sure? Um, See if you can push yourself to do that. Trying to actually put into effect one of your tests and go through a what, so what, now what cycle. Think about doing that before your fall coalition meeting. Or perhaps you look at that and go, Psh, we can do that by July. Awesome. Make a plan. Talk to your work group co-lead and say, what's realistic here? Let's start to move on it. Next piece, oh, it says share the April 10th session. That's from last one. You don't need to share that. But we want to remind you that we have these resources for you. And I've got weekly office hours, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 12 to 1. We'd love to see you there. I know it's almost time. Sable put in the link, the chat, the link to the feedback. Please provide us that feedback. Just for the heck of it right now, for those of you who can stay on for half a second, I'm going to ask you to do a fist of 5. This is an adaptive action right here. Help us refine this strategy. A fist if you disagree with it, 5 if you strongly agree, and in between. Was this content relevant and useful to you? Please give me a fist to 5 right now. 0 if it wasn't useful, 5 if it was. Thank you. I'm seeing lots of 4s and 5s. It's okay if you put a fist up. I love seeing the feedback. And do you feel excited to use this content in your next work group meeting? Fist to 5. Awesome. Okay, thank you all. It's 12:16. We appreciate your time. Please don't hesitate to follow up with Erin and I at any point. And we'll stay on for a couple minutes for those folks who are able to if you have any questions. Cheers, everybody. Happy Friday.
Thank you.